For decades, older adults with tinnitus have been told to live with it, as if it's just an annoying noise. But new research shows that tinnitus itself, not hearing loss, may be a stronger driver of depression risk in older adults. And today, I want to dig into the science, the mechanisms, and what this means for patient care, so that we can improve the quality of life for those with tinnitus, and in some cases, even save lives. I'm Dr. Julie Prutsman, audiologist, owner, and founder of Sound Relief Tinnitus and Hearing Center. After decades of focusing on tinnitus, I can tell you that the harm often isn't the ringing itself. It's what happens when people are told to simply live with it or to try to ignore it. In this video, we'll show how this advice not only impacts a patient's sense of hope, but it can also lead to feelings of helplessness, which worsens the overall symptoms associated with tinnitus. If you know someone who could benefit from this information, please share this video with them. Also, please like this video and subscribe so we can reach more people who need it. One important note before we dive in, I will be mentioning numerous studies throughout this video. You can find links to this research and much more in the video's description once you're done watching. Let's start with the hard evidence. A recent study published in the Laryngoscope looked specifically at adults over age 69 with tinnitus and found something very striking. Hearing loss alone was not significantly linked to depression, but severe tinnitus symptoms were strongly associated with depressive symptoms, even after adjusting for the degree of hearing loss. This was not the first hint of this connection. It's part of a broader pattern in the literature. A recent systematic review and meta-analysis, including 22 studies, found that tinnitus was associated with nearly double the odds of depression compared with people without tinnitus. Another long-term cohort study from the Rotterdam study, involving more than 5,000 participants aged 40 and older, found that people reporting tinnitus that interfered with daily life had significantly higher depressive and anxiety symptoms, plus poorer sleep quality than those without bothersome tinnitus. More evidence from large population cohorts, such as the Gutenberg Health Study, showed that in over 8,500 adults, those with tinnitus had over twice the odds of depressive symptoms, even after adjusting for comorbidities such as hearing loss. And in a wide scoping review of more than 30 studies looking at tinnitus and psychiatric comorbidity, depression was among the most frequently associated mental health symptoms alongside anxiety and stress. So, the evidence isn't isolated. Multiple independent studies using different populations and methods show the same basic pattern. Bothersome tinnitus and depressive symptoms are closely linked in adults, especially older adults. Now let's unpack why this might be. First, it's important to understand that tinnitus is not just a sensation. It's a persistent internal sound that contributes to a range of associated symptoms, from mild to debilitating. We know from detailed reviews that the severity of the emotional distress people experience from tinnitus is often more strongly correlated with depressive symptoms than the measured loudness of the tinnitus itself. One way to think about this is that tinnitus creates a constant cognitive load. It's there when you're trying to rest, it's there when you're trying to sleep, it's there when you're trying to think and focus. That persistent internal sound can constantly trigger the fight or flight response when it's labeled as a threat, and that's stressful for the brain. Population analysis also suggests that chronic tinnitus may mediate part of the relationship between hearing loss and depression, meaning that some of the emotional distress previously attributed to hearing loss may actually be due to the presence of the tinnitus itself. This doesn't mean hearing loss isn't important. It clearly is, but it highlights that tinnitus is not a simple byproduct of hearing loss. It's an independent predictor of emotional distress. From my experience, if a person with tinnitus ignores their hearing loss, this component can also trigger depression-like symptoms because of the strain it puts on relationships and social engagement. In other words, Combine significant hearing loss with bothersome tinnitus, and you have two complex symptoms feeding off each other, which often leads to the cognitive distress cycle of tinnitus. This cycle is what we must reverse in order to change bothersome tinnitus to non-bothersome, and leads to reduced tinnitus intensity and less depressive symptoms over time. In order to reverse this cycle, we must restore the missing auditory input to the brain so that it's not searching for it or straining to hear speech clearly. To understand why tinnitus carries such emotional weight, it helps to consider the brain networks involved. We know from neurobiological research that tinnitus engages not just auditory pathways, but the limbic system in the brain as well, or the parts of the brain responsible for emotion, salience, and threat detection. This is part of why tinnitus is not just heard, it's felt, and can lead to changes in mood and depression. Other research suggests that chronic tinnitus may influence cognitive function and emotional regulation, and that these effects become more pronounced with age. Adults over age 60 were shown to have higher risk associations between tinnitus and cognitive function, anxiety, and depression compared with younger adults. Importantly, the presence of tinnitus appears to be more strongly tied to psychological impact, like depression and anxiety, than the loudness of the tinnitus itself. This aligns with classic research showing high correlations between tinnitus severity scores and depressive symptom scores in clinical samples. So, the emerging model is not tinnitus noise plus hearing loss equals depression. Instead, it's bothersome tinnitus plus distress equals emotional strain, and that strain drives much of the depression risk. This is where the clinician-patient interaction becomes critical. In many cases, older adults with tinnitus are told they must learn to live with it because there is no easy fix. But that phrase communicates helplessness. You have no control, you must endure it, and repeatedly hearing that message can erode hope. The research doesn't measure hope directly, but clinical observations and psychological literature show that perceived lack of control over symptoms is closely linked with emotional distress, anxiety, and depressive tendencies. In the context of tinnitus, when people feel their symptoms are uncontrollable, they report greater intrusive thinking, worse sleep, and greater emotional distress, even when the measurable tinnitus itself might be considered mild. So part of what we see in the depression link may not be just the sound of tinnitus, it's what the sound represents psychologically. Possibly a reminder of aging, or of loss or changes in hearing, or a sense that nothing can be done to help. If anyone ever questions the importance of hope and access to knowledgeable care, we are reminded of the heartbreaking loss of Kent Taylor, founder and CEO of Texas Roadhouse. In March 2021, after his tinnitus became profoundly debilitating following a COVID-19 infection, Kent took his own life. During a time already marked by isolation, uncertainty, and fear, he struggled to find meaningful relief and began to feel that none was possible. For those who knew him, Kent was larger than life, energetic, generous, and deeply committed to the people around him. His death is a painful reminder of how overwhelming tinnitus can become when someone feels trapped without answers. In my practice, this is the outcome we work tirelessly to prevent, especially because we know there are effective, compassionate treatments that can help people regain stability, relief, and hope. Kent's restaurant chain honors him every year by donating 100% of their profits on the first Monday in February to the American Tinnitus Association. The ATA uses these funds to provide grants to emerging researchers, helping them begin and advance their work in tinnitus research. The organization also supports programs such as the Tinnitus Advisors Program, a hotline that connects individuals struggling with tinnitus to specialists trained in tinnitus care. So what do we do with all of this knowledge? First, all healthcare providers must move beyond dismissing tinnitus as an inevitable, untreatable symptom of aging that can be ignored. In most cases, it cannot be ignored, and that advice only worsens their symptoms. Today, we know there is a substantial and growing body of evidence showing that interventions aimed at reducing tinnitus-related distress, including cognitive behavioral therapy, tinnitus retraining therapy, and multidisciplinary tinnitus care, are associated with meaningful improvements in emotional well-being. Cognitive behavioral therapy reshapes the emotional response to tinnitus, which directly impacts the limbic system in a positive way. Sound therapy and habituation strategies address the perceptual aspects of tinnitus and serve to calm down the nervous system's response to it. Combine these approaches, as we do with the sound relief method, and that treats all of the systems of the brain involved in tinnitus to maximize treatment outcomes. This doesn't mean every person with tinnitus will never hear ringing again, but it does mean we can give them tools and empowerment, thus restoring a sense of control, which is itself therapeutic. And when tinnitus no longer impacts the activities people enjoyed prior to tinnitus onset, they live happier and more fulfilled lives. Clinically, this means screening for distress and depressive symptoms should be routine with reports of tinnitus, not optional. And referrals to audiologists who specialize in tinnitus needs to be the standard first step in care to avoid a person being told, just go home and live with it, which leads to depressive symptoms from tinnitus onset. Referrals to mental health specialists might also be needed when a high level of depression is reported, or there are anxiety disorders that could be contributing to tinnitus distress as well. The science is clear. Tinnitus isn't just an annoying symptom. It's frequently linked with depression, anxiety, sleep disruption, and lowered quality of life. And it may be a stronger driver of depression risk in older adults than hearing loss alone. Telling someone to just live with it isn't just wrong, it's harmful. Our mission has always been to give people real tools, restore a sense of hope, and help them live well, not just cope or endure a life with bothersome tinnitus. That's why tinnitus must be taken seriously as an emotional and neurological symptom that can lead to serious health effects like depression. Instead of dismissing tinnitus patients and their complaints, we need to direct them to audiologists who know how to treat it using proven techniques like tinnitus retraining therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, prescriptive sound therapy, and combinations of all three to match the needs of each individual patient. Audiologists can also guide patients to the right referral sources when necessary to address the whole person, not just one component of the problem. The risks are simply too great not to. I hope this information was informative and helpful in explaining the link between tinnitus and depression and why it is so important to work with professionals that understand these connections. If you know someone who could benefit from this information, please share this video with them. Also, please like this video and subscribe so we can reach more people who need more of this type of information. Thank you.